Hey guys, tonight we slip off our sneakers, set down the buzzing phone, and step into a place where Wi-Fi doesn't exist, where even candles are a luxury, and where you're about to sleep the way people did 1,000 years ago. Imagine walking into a Viking longhouse, timbers creaking, a roof thatched thick against the icy wind, and air thick with wood smoke. It smells like roasted meat, damp wool, and a little too much wet dog. This isn't your cozy hotel suite. In fact, you probably wouldn't survive a week here without your allergy meds. But for the people who lived in these vast wooden halls, it was home. And it was where they curled up at night in search of the best sleep history has to offer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from and what hour of the night it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge inside the Viking longhouse, boots scraping against hard-packed earth that serves as the floor. The first thing you notice is the darkness. Sunset falls early this far north, and without streetlights or glowing billboards. The night really means night. A few hearths burn along the center of the room, their flames licking upward and casting wild shadows on the beams. The fire does more than cook stew. It anchors the household, and at bedtime, it becomes the soft lullaby that crackles you toward slumber. You feel the warmth hit your face, but the air behind you still carries a cold draft, sneaking through the gaps in the walls. The Vikings knew this chill well. Their architecture wasn't about airtight insulation, but about gathering people close enough together to make warmth a collective achievement. You think about modern sleep experts who say a cool room helps you sleep better. The Vikings didn't have climate control, but by accident or design. Their nights were often at that perfect temperature, just above shivering, just below sweating. A historical fact slides in here. Longhouses could stretch more than 70 feet, hosting entire families, servants, and even livestock. Yes, you heard that right, sometimes goats or cows shared the same roof. Quirky, isn't it? And historians still argue whether this was mainly for warmth or simply for convenience, since hauling animals outside in blizzards wasn't much fun. Imagine trying to doze off with a cow shifting around next to your bedroll. Beats a white noise machine, I guess. The sleeping areas themselves weren't private bedrooms like you know. Instead, platforms along the walls held bedding stuffed with straw or covered in animal pelts. You run your hand over a hide ruff on one side, soft and surprisingly cozy on the other. No memory foam, no lavender-scented pillows, but these rustic setups worked. The hides trapped heat, the straw added cushioning, and together they gave tired Viking bodies a restorative rest after long days of farming, raiding, or smithing. You sink down onto one of these platforms, feeling how the uneven straw shifts beneath you. It's lumpy, yes, but oddly grounding. Your back presses against something solid, and you realize this isn't so different from modern advocates of firmer mattresses, who swear they reduce aches and pains. The Vikings may not have studied sleep ergonomics, but they stumbled into similar results. Of course, the longhouse wasn't silent. Children whispered before drifting off. Elders coughed, and outside, wolves howled into the freezing night. Yet within these walls, the combined breath of dozens created a steady, rhythmic hum. It's almost like the modern ASMR trend. Except instead of listening to whispered, "Hello, hello," you're lulled by the snores of your uncle, Bjorn and the occasional snort from a pig in the corner. Oddly comforting, you wrap yourself in a wool blanket, scratchy against your cheek, but warm nonetheless. Your eyelids grow heavy, though the night is still young. The Vikings lived without alarm clocks, without 9-to-5 schedules, and without Netflix auto-playing the next episode. They followed the cycles of the sun, the labor of the seasons, and the demands of survival. And when the day's work ended, sleep wasn't optional, it was sacred. It was healing, it was survival. As you close your eyes in this smoky, crowded longhouse, you realize you're closer to these ancient sleepers than you thought. Your own search for rest, the right temperature, the right sounds, the right comfort isn't so different. Maybe their way of life, raw and imperfect as it was, accidentally unlocked something modern. Science is only now beginning to rediscover the profound power of natural sleep. You're still stretched out on that straw-stuffed bedding, but now your eyes wander upward, tracing the beams of the longhouse as shadows flicker across them. Outside, the night has swallowed the landscape whole. The Vikings didn't just live with darkness, they lived in a place where darkness itself shaped their very biology. You try to imagine it. No glowing phones under the blanket, no alarm clock digits burning into your eyelids, no highway lamps seeping in through thin curtains. Just a depth of black so total that even your own hand disappears an inch from your face. You breathe in the smoky air and feel how your body reacts. There's a primal calm that settles in when light no longer intrudes. Historians suggest that Viking sleep cycles were deeply tied to this enveloping night. With no artificial lighting, bedtime arrived not by choice, but by necessity. When the sun dipped, so did you. And when dawn cracked open, you stirred again. Not because of a snooze button, but because the sky demanded it. You might chuckle now, thinking about how many people today fight off sleep with caffeine, TikTok reels, and just one more episode. But here, the darkness has no rival. It presses against you, gently yet firmly guiding you to close your eyes. It's like nature itself whispering, "That's enough, my friend." The quirky tidbit here: archaeologists have found evidence that Vikings sometimes hung fish oil lamps along the longhouse walls, tiny, flickering flames that provided just enough glow to move about, but not enough to trick the brain into wakefulness. Can you imagine your bedtime routine including a whale oil nightlight? Not exactly the soothing lavender candle from Bath and Body Works, but it did the trick. And unlike your LED lamp, it didn't mess with melatonin production. Historians still argue whether Vikings practiced what's called segmented sleep. This was common in other medieval societies. People would fall asleep after dusk, wake for an hour or two around midnight, then return to slumber until dawn. Some believe Vikings used that midnight waking period for quiet prayers, tending the fire, or, let's be honest, sneaking in a snack of dried fish. Others argue the harsh northern nights encouraged one long, deep rest instead. Either way, the absence of light governed every choice. You shuffle in your bedding and realize how alien this would feel for you. In your world, even the darkest bedroom has a little red glow from a charger, or headlights streaking across blinds, or the hallway bulb left on, just in case. Here, the dark is absolute, and oddly enough, that's what made it therapeutic. Modern science now insists that real darkness is crucial for quality sleep, allowing your brain to cycle properly through deep and REM stages. The Vikings didn't need blue light, glasses, or blackout. Curtains, they had the real deal. The sounds of night press in. You hear the crackle of fire, the faint shift of bodies beside you, but beyond that, nothing. No cars, No planes, no buzzing fridge in the corner. The silence is thick, broken only by nature itself, the groan of wind, the snap of ice, maybe the far-off cry of an owl. Your ears adjust, and soon that emptiness becomes its own kind of music. You realize that, in a place like this, sleep wasn't a battle against distractions. It was the natural conclusion to a day. There's a sleepy humor in imagining a Viking teen begging his parents, "Just 5 more minutes, Mom. I need to finish carving this rune." Nope. When the darkness fell, everyone went down together. The social rhythm was synchronized. Nobody was binge-watching alone at a.m. or scrolling under the blanket. Instead, the collective hush swept the household like a tide, and you couldn't resist being carried along. You blink, trying to hold onto the last traces of firelight, but soon even that dulls. The longhouse grows heavier with rest. Your body feels slower, heavier, and calmer, as if the ancient night itself has wrapped you in its arms. And before long, you surrender to it, discovering that maybe the Vikings were right. The best sleep isn't found in perfect bedding or smart technology. It's found in perfect darkness. You wake sometime in the deep night. Though wake might be too strong a word, you stir, you shift. You notice the itch of straw poking through the wool beneath you. The bedding here is far from the pillow-top mattress you're used to. Instead, you're lying on a platform lined with straw bundles, topped with animal hides that smell faintly of smoke and musk. You run your fingers along the fur side, softer than you expected, though the underside is coarse and scratchy, like sandpaper. This is where Viking sleep turns tactile. Animal hides were the mattress toppers of their world, pulled from cows, sheep, or even bears if you were wealthy enough to brag. Beneath them, straw or reeds stuffed into sacks created padding. Sure, lumps formed quickly, and after a while the smell of damp earth and hay seeped up. But compared to lying on cold planks or bare dirt, this was pure luxury. You shift again and think, yeah, I've stayed in worse Airbnbs. The practical side of this bedding makes sense. Straw was abundant after harvests, cheap to replace, and easy to spread out for insulation. But it came with quirks. Fleas, lice, and other unwelcome roommates often nested right alongside sleepers. Historians still argue whether regular straw replacement was part of the Viking housekeeping routine, or if most families just accepted the itchy company. Either way, people didn't seem to mind. It was simply the cost of comfort. You turn toward the hides and notice how warm they are. Wool and fur trapped heat efficiently, creating a cocoon effect against the icy drafts, leaking through the longhouse walls. For a family living through brutal winters, this wasn't just cozy, it was survival. Interestingly, some historians point out that these hides may have served double duty, dragged off the bedding during the day to become cloaks or outdoor wraps. Talk about multi-purpose furniture. One blanket by night, Viking outerwear by day. And here's a quirky little detail. Sometimes dried seaweed was used instead of straw, stuffed into mattresses for a springier feel. Imagine tucking yourself into bed and realizing you're basically lying on yesterday's kelp. Yet modern researchers testing this odd bedding have found it surprisingly resilient, with fewer pests than straw. So, next time someone brags about their eco-friendly bamboo mattress, just remember you could be rocking the Viking Seaweed Deluxe. The sounds of the longhouse remind you you're not alone. Someone snores heavily to your left, while a child coughs in the far corner. These shared sleeping platforms meant family bonds were quite literal. You were pressed shoulder to shoulder with parents, siblings, maybe even visiting relatives. Privacy was non-existent. You roll slightly and bump into an imaginary Viking cousin. "Sorry, cousin Eric. I didn't mean to elbow you." In modern terms, this would be a sleepover nightmare. In Viking times, it was normal. Firelight still flickers faintly, and you notice sparks occasionally float upward into the rafters. A dangerous thought crosses your mind. What if a spark lands on these dry hides? Historians note that accidental longhouse fires were a real hazard, which makes sense when you consider everyone's bedding was highly flammable. You suddenly feel grateful for your boring smoke alarm back home. Still, you can't help but admire how resourceful these people were. Bedding wasn't bought. It was built. It reflected the seasons, the animals on hand, and the family's wealth. A richer household might add layers of fine woolen blankets dyed with earthy pigments. A poorer one might scrape by with little more than a rough pelt. Either way, everyone found rest here. You settle back into the straw, shifting to find the least lumpy spot. It's not perfect, but you realize something important. Your body adapts, with no expectation of a plush mattress. The Vikings slept deeply anyway, their exhaustion carrying them past discomfort into true rest. You smile, thinking about modern people fussing over thread counts and cooling gel pillows. Meanwhile, these ancient sleepers managed with straw, fur, and the sheer relief of surviving another day. Your eyelids lower again, soothed by the warmth trapped beneath the hides. Maybe, just maybe, this imperfect bed is the secret ingredient. Modern life has forgotten simplicity. You exhale into the smoky air, sinking back into Viking comfort lumpy, itchy yet strangely grounding. You stir as a soft scent fills the longhouse, drifting in from a corner where someone has tucked away bundles of dried herbs. The Vikings didn't just collapse into sleep-cold turkey, they had rituals, small comforts, and a few tricks to make the night smoother. Tonight, you notice a faint aroma of chamomile-like blossoms, though it isn't exactly chamomile. Instead, it's meadowsweet, a plant prized for its calming properties. Someone must have burned or brewed it earlier, letting the fragrance hang in the smoky air. You picture a Viking mother pouring a thick wooden cup of mead before bedtime. Mead, that golden honey wine, wasn't just for rowdy feasts, it was also sipped in smaller amounts as a nightcap. Alcohol relaxes the body, though you know it doesn't always lead to great sleep cycles. Still, for a Viking farmer whose muscles ache after swinging an axe all day, one warming drink could mean the difference between tossing and turning or melting into slumber. Your own tongue tingles at the thought, sweet honey, fermented sharpness. Maybe a faint aftertaste of herbs tossed into the brew. Some households steeped calming plants like yarrow or thyme, making a kind of proto-sleepy-time tea. You chuckle, realizing Vikings may have been closer to your modern bedtime routine than you thought. Herbal infusion, check. Alcoholic. Sleep aid, check. Cozy blanket, check. The only thing missing is a podcast droning in the background. Here's a quirky fact. Valerian root, still sold in pharmacies today as a sleep aid, grew in Northern Europe and was sometimes collected for both medicine and magic. Imagine chewing on a root that smells like dirty socks just to help you nod off. And yet, it worked well enough that even monks later adopted it. The Vikings, practical as always, may have used it too, but not every herb was innocent. Some stronger plants like henbane were known for their hallucinogenic properties. Historians still argue whether Vikings used them as sleep aids, intoxicants, or outright spiritual gateways. The line between a calming bedtime tea and a full-on vision quest was thin. You sip from your imaginary cup and wonder, am I winding down for rest? or about to dream of Odin himself knocking on the door. Dreams mattered in this culture. Bedtime wasn't just about recharging the body. It was also a gateway to messages, omens, and hidden truths. So sipping that mead wasn't just for relaxation, it was an invitation to deeper, stranger realms of consciousness. A Viking might settle in, hoping that tonight's visions would reveal whether tomorrow's voyage would end in fortune or shipwreck. Sleep, in other words, was a negotiation with fate. The family around you murmurs quietly, trading small rituals before drifting off. Someone tucks herbs into a pouch beneath a pillow of bundled cloth. Someone else whispers a short prayer to Frigg, goddess of love and household, asking for safe rest. It strikes you as oddly familiar. Haven't you whispered a little hope to the universe before bed too? Whether it's please let tomorrow's meeting go well, or just give me 5 more hours of solid sleep. The impulse is timeless. The longhouse air grows heavier as the mead settles in your stomach. The warmth spreads, your muscles unclench, and your mind slides into that dreamy space where thoughts blur into nonsense. You imagine the fire's glow shifting into faces, the beams above bending into patterns. The herbs take hold, the drink softens your edges, and sleep tiptoes closer. Then comes a sudden snore from the next bedding rollover, jarring enough to make you laugh under your breath. Some things never change no matter the century, no matter the culture. Somebody always the noisy sleeper. You grin, then let it fade. The sounds, the smells, the warmth, they all layer together, weaving you into a Viking lullaby. Tonight you realize you don't just fall asleep. You're ushered there by ritual, by plants, by drink, by whispered hopes. And maybe that's the lesson modern nights have lost. It isn't only about shutting your eyes. It's about preparing the body and spirit to rest. A journey guided by herbs, mead, and the quiet conviction that dreams mean something more than random sparks in the brain. You roll onto your side, the hides shifting beneath you, and suddenly you're aware of the press of bodies nearby. Viking sleep wasn't a solitary retreat into your own room, it was communal, intimate, a tangle of family, servants, and sometimes even guests all bundled, closed together on the raised platforms along the longhouse walls. Privacy, forget about it. Comfort, well, it depended on how much you liked your relatives. You feel the warmth of another person's shoulder against yours. That's no accident. Shared sleeping wasn't just about space. It was about survival. When winter winds howled across the fjords and snow piled high outside, human warmth was as valuable as wool or fire. A dozen bodies radiating heat together created a natural furnace, turning the longhouse into one big collective blanket. You probably wouldn't love being jammed shoulder to shoulder with your snoring uncle, but you definitely appreciate not freezing to death. A mainstream historical fact here. Sagas and archaeological studies confirm that Viking households were large, often containing extended families under one roof. Beds weren't individualized, but designed for clusters of sleepers. You weren't going to bed alone. You were sinking into a patchwork of bodies that blended security, warmth, and community. The quirky side of this? Children often slept right between parents, and animals weren't always banished outdoors. Chickens might roost in corners, cats wandered freely, and dogs sometimes curled up at the foot of bedding. It's almost funny modern people spend big money on weighted blankets for comfort, while a Viking child had the combined weight of mom, dad, siblings, and a snoozing sheepdog pinning them down. Historians still argue whether this closeness was entirely practical or partly cultural. Did Vikings simply sleep in groups for warmth, or did it reinforce family bonds? Maybe both. After all, the Longhouse wasn't just a shelter. It was the beating heart of Viking life, a place where everything happened feasting, storytelling, crafting, and, when the day was done, sleeping. Sharing the nightly ritual must have deepened a sense of togetherness. You turn slightly and hear soft breathing all around. It's oddly soothing, like an ancient Aasimar soundtrack, the inhale and exhale of half a dozen sleepers, blending into one rhythm. At first, it might feel claustrophobic, but after a while, it's almost hypnotic. A reassurance that you're not alone, that the household is strong, that if anything stirred outside, you'd all rise together. Still, you can't help but laugh imagining the little annoyances. Someone hogs the blanket. Someone kicks in their sleep. Someone talks nonsense in the middle of the night, rambling about goats. You can almost hear a Viking mother scolding in a whisper. Hush now. The baby's sleeping. Same struggles, different century. And yet, in this closeness, something sacred emerges. You realize how modern life separates us each in our own room, our own bed, our own glowing screens. But here, you are part of a collective body, a unit. Sleep isn't lonely. It's shared. And in the dead of winter, that could mean the difference between waking rested or not waking at all. The fire crackles lower now, its light dimmer, shadows stretching across fur and faces. You pull the hide tighter, pressed snug against the warmth of others, and feel your heartbeat slow. Communal sleep isn't glamorous, but it's grounding. You're cradled not by silence and solitude, but by the company of your people. And whether you realize it or not, that steady presence lulls you toward the deepest, safest sleep you've ever known. You wake again, not because of noise or cold, but because a thin sliver of light sneaks through the cracks in the longhouse roof. Outside, the sun hasn't fully risen, but here in the north, its rhythm is a little dramatic. You're in a world where the day isn't just day and the night isn't just night. The extremes of light and darkness bend time itself, and Viking sleep bends with it. In summer, the days stretch almost endlessly. You imagine standing outside, eyes squinting against a midnight sun that refuses to set. The longhouse never really gets dark, only dim, and the whole household must decide. Do you sleep in twilight, or just keep working until exhaustion forces you down? Modern sleep scientists talk about circadian rhythms and melatonin levels. Vikings just listened to the sky. The light said stay awake, so they did. Now picture winter. The sun drags itself up late and vanishes early, leaving vast gulfs of darkness. You'd think that meant longer sleeps, and maybe it did. Historians still argue whether Vikings slept more in winter, taking advantage of the long nights, or whether they worked by firelight and moonlight to keep productivity going. Some say segmented. Sleep too long bouts broken. By a wakeful hour in between was more likely during those endless nights. Others argue the sheer physical labor of farming, hauling, or voyaging made people crash for one long stretch. Regardless of the season, you step outside for a moment, blinking against the pale northern dawn. In summer, the birds are already squawking like alarm clocks on caffeine. In winter, the stillness feels eternal, as though time has slowed to a crawl. You can almost sense how profoundly these shifting rhythms shaped a Viking's inner world. Imagine living half your year in a land of perpetual light, then flipping into a season of shadow. No wonder their myths are filled with battles between day and night, gods of sun and frost back inside. You lie down again, thinking of your own life, where light is always available at the flick of a switch. Your day lasts as long as you want it to. But here, the world itself decides when you rise and when you sleep. That's not just practical, it's humbling. It means admitting you're smaller than the sky, that your schedule bends to forces you can't control. The quirky tidbit: some Viking farmers apparently used reflective snow to their advantage, working by moonlight, bouncing off white fields. Imagine plowing under a full moon in January, your body begging for bed, while the night sky turns everything silver. Talk about messing with your sleep cycle. Yet somehow it worked. Bodies adapted. Minds adjusted. Sleep came when it was possible, and waking came when it was needed. And while you might complain today about jet lag or daylight savings time, the Vikings lived with cosmic jet lag built into their year, and still they thrived. You curl back into your bedding, thinking how different this rhythm is from the clock-dominated world you know. No shift work, no midnight fast food runs, no 24-hour gyms, just the eternal push and pull of the sun. You let your breath match the rise and fall of the household around you, wondering if surrendering to daylight itself might be the secret to sleep that feels both natural and complete. The fire is low now, just a faint glow on the hearthstones. And you notice how much the room changes when the flames shrink. The longhouse cools quickly, drafts sneaking in, shadows stretching wide. Yet even in this hush, the fire never truly dies. Someone always tends it, feeding bits of wood, coaxing sparks into embers. For the Vikings, fire wasn't just warmth, it was life itself. And at night, it became the lullaby you didn't know you needed. You listen, eyes half shut, as the crackle fills the silence. It's irregular, like nature's own playlist pops. Hisses, soft sighs of burning wood. You compare it to your modern white noise. Machine, or that looped fireplace video on YouTube. This is the original version, raw and unpredictable. And here's the thing, it works. Your heartbeat slows as the sound pulses gently, syncing with your breath. Maybe it's not so different from falling asleep to the hum of a fan, just a bit more primal. A mainstream historical fact: Viking longhouses almost always had a central hearth that ran down the middle, serving as the household's anchor. Cooking, light, protection, and warmth all flowed from this fire. By night, it glowed steady, not too bright, but enough to ward off both predators outside and spirits imagined in the dark. The hearth wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Now the quirky detail, sometimes dried animal. Dung was tossed onto the fire to keep it smoldering longer. Yep, you might be drifting off to the sweet lullaby of crackling flames powered partly by cow pies. You wrinkle your nose, but can't help grinning. Beats running out of firewood, right? And the smell, while not exactly vanilla candle, was something the Vikings grew up with until it probably felt like home. Historians still argue whether families let the fire burn through the night, or whether they banked it carefully, covering embers with ash to keep a slow heat alive until morning. Either way, the goal was the same: keep the flame breathing, never fully extinguished, because to wake to a cold hearth meant scrambling in the frost for tinder, a miserable way to start a day. You picture yourself dozing beside the glow, the flicker painting your eyelids orange even as you drift deeper. The warmth doesn't just comfort, it reassures you that danger is kept at bay. Outside, wolves might pace the edges of the settlement, eyes reflecting starlight. But inside, the fire is a guardian. You realize that sleep feels safer when something or someone stands watch. The rhythm of it seeps into you. Crackle, sigh, pop. It's the Viking version of rain sounds on a sleep app. Except this one is alive, always changing, always reminding you that life flickers on even as you rest. You smile at the thought. Imagine a Viking telling you, "Don't worry, the hearth will watch over you." And you'd believe it. As your body loosens, the fire hums gently in the background, stitching your dreams together with warmth and light. You surrender again, lulled not by silence, but by a heartbeat of flame, realizing this was one of their greatest sleep secrets. Not complete quiet, not perfect comfort, but the steady companionship of fire. You stir again in the half-dark, the fire still pulsing faintly, and suddenly you feel a shift in the air, not physical, but mental. Here in the Viking world, sleep isn't just about tired muscles or cozy hides. It's haunted by stories, gods, and the thin line between dream and reality. As you lie back, you realize every shadow on the wall could be more than just a trick of flame. The Vikings lived inside a web of myths where gods, giants, and spirits weren't abstract, they were immediate, present. And at night, when the mind softened, that presence grew stronger. You pull the blanket tighter, half expecting Odin himself to lean over your shoulder, one eye gleaming in the firelight. Sleep, for these people, wasn't an escape. It was an opening. Here's the mainstream fact Norse sagas describe dreams as direct channels to the divine. A dream of a wolf might warn of betrayal. A dream of the sea could predict a voyage's outcome. Sleep was a sacred tool, a place where fate whispered. So naturally, the night was charged with a mix of awe and unease. But there's a quirky twist. Vikings also believed in spirits called draugr, restless dead who could rise at night to torment the living. Imagine trying to fall asleep, knowing your grumpy neighbor might return from the grave just to sit on your chest. It's basically their version of sleep paralysis. You can almost laugh, but then a chill runs through you as the longhouse creaks, and you wonder how many of them jolted awake in terror, convinced something unseen was crouching nearby. Historians still argue whether fear of these spirits was mostly symbolic, a way to enforce moral behavior, or whether genuine midnight rituals were practiced to keep them at bay. Some say charms and carvings were placed near bedding, protective amulets clutched under blankets. Others argue the mere act of sleeping close together was a safeguard, because evil is braver when you're alone. You hear a whisper from across the longhouse, someone mumbling a prayer to Thor, perhaps asking for strength to banish nightmares. Another voice hums softly, maybe a lullaby passed down from grandmother to child. You realize these weren't just superstitions. They were survival strategies, mental armor against the unknown. And then you think about your own nights, the irrational jolts. When you swear you heard something in the hallway, the shadows that seem to move just beyond your vision. Humans haven't changed much. Only the names of our fears have. For the Vikings, it was draugr. For you, it might be, did I lock the front door? Or was that just the cat? Or the fire pops suddenly, a spark shooting upward, and you jump before chuckling under your breath. That tiny scare makes you feel closer to these ancient sleepers. Because in that moment, you're the same, half asleep, half afraid, clinging to warmth while the dark outside feels like it has teeth. So you snuggle deeper into your bedding, whispering your own little protective mantra, just let me rest. And maybe that's what they whispered too, hoping their gods and their courage would carry them safely through the shadowed hours until morning. You shift, and suddenly the ground beneath you feels different, unsteady, rocking gently as though the longhouse has melted away and you're lying on the deck of a ship. Viking life wasn't bound to land. It spilled onto the sea, and with it came a new rhythm of sleep. You blink against the salty spray, hear the creak of timbers, and realize that here, slumber isn't a long, uninterrupted stretch. It's a series of scraps grabbed between waves. Imagine being part of a crew rowing across the North Sea. Your arms ache, your clothes are soaked, and your stomach growls from the constant diet of dried fish. The boat never stops moving, so neither does your body. Yet somehow, you must rest. Sailors huddled together beneath wool cloaks, taking turns with the oars. Sleep came in shifts, short naps stolen under the open sky, your head resting on a rolled-up bundle of rope or a fellow sailor's shoulder. Not exactly a spa retreat. A mainstream historical fact: Viking ships, like the famous longships, weren't built with cabins or cozy bunks. They were sleek, open vessels designed for speed and maneuverability. That meant sailors slept right there on deck, exposed to wind, rain, and crashing waves. And yet, these voyages lasted weeks, even months. So napping at sea was a skill as essential as steering the rudder. The quirky side? Archaeologists have found evidence that some ships carried woolen tents stretched across the deck, offering a little cover for sleep. Picture that half a dozen men crammed under a damp canvas, snoring in chorus while seawater splashed their feet. Not glamorous, but compared to the raw open air, it must have felt like a 5-star upgrade. Historians still argue how much true deep sleep a sailor could get under these conditions. Did exhaustion force them into REM cycles anyway, even in bursts? Or were Viking sailors chronically underrested, trading long-term health for conquest and exploration? The debate lingers, but one thing's certain: the human body adapts. When it must, it learns to snatch rest from chaos. You imagine lying back on those planks, every bone in your body vibrating with the sea's rhythm. At first, you'd fight at the tilt, the splash, the constant noise. But eventually, your brain would sync with the rocking, lulling you into a strange half-sleep, almost like a giant cradle. Except this cradle might tip you into the freezing ocean if you weren't careful. You smirk, thinking of modern travelers complaining about jet lag or turbulence on a 6-hour flight. Try sleeping on a wet deck while rowing between storms. That's commitment. And yet, you can't help but admire it. These sailors didn't wait for the perfect conditions. They slept when they could, wherever they could, because survival demanded it. As the ship sways beneath you, you close your eyes and let the rhythm do its work. The sea hums like a lullaby, and though it's rough, though it's wet, though it's far from comfortable, it carries you into sleep just the same. You realize that Viking sailors weren't deprived, they were masters of adaptation, turning even the harshest voyages into a place where rest was still possible. The ship's rocking fades, and you're back inside the longhouse again. But tonight is different. The air is thick with the smell of roasted meat, spilled mead, and sweat from too many bodies crammed together. The hall is alive, buzzing with music, laughter, and the pounding of feet against wooden floors. Tonight, nobody is thinking about sleep. This is a feast night, a festival, a time when the rules of rest are thrown out the door. You sit cross-legged, near the fire as horns are lifted, voices booming in toasts to gods and ancestors. A skald, a poet, stands tall, weaving a saga that rolls over the crowd like thunder. The energy is infectious, even if your eyelids are heavy. The noise and excitement won't let you surrender to slumber just yet. You realize quickly, Viking life wasn't all disciplined. Bedtime rituals and perfect darkness. Sometimes nights stretched long, fueled by celebration. A mainstream fact, Viking feasts could last several days, especially tied to seasonal events like Yule or harvest festivals. These weren't quiet family dinners, they were community-wide gatherings filled with storytelling, boasting, gift-giving, and of course, copious drinking. In such moments, sleep became secondary. You didn't retreat early unless you wanted to miss half the action. The quirky tidbit. Archaeological digs have turned up massive quantities of animal bones and drinking vessels in feast sites, suggesting meals so huge that even the leftovers tell a story. Imagine drifting off on a straw bed, while a goat bone rolls across the floor because someone tossed it aside after gnawing. Not exactly the most serene sleep environment. Historians still argue about how feasts balanced with daily survival. Some claim they were rare indulgences, reserved for key occasions, while others suggest a culture where gathering and storytelling were frequent enough to shape social life. Either way, those nights were loud, messy, and unforgettable, and restful sleep had to wait its turn. You glance around the hall and notice a few figures already slumped in corners, mead horns still dangling from their hands. These aren't neatly tucked in sleepers. They're casualties of revelry, sprawled out wherever exhaustion took them. One man snores loudly against a wooden beam. Another dozes face first into a half-eaten platter. You smile. It's the Viking version of falling asleep on the couch after too much turkey at Thanksgiving. But even amidst the chaos, something soothing lurks. The rhythms of music, the hypnotic drone of chanting, the steady drumbeat of feet on wood. They create a strange background hum, almost like a heartbeat for the whole community. For some, that noise might have been enough to tip them gently into dreams. Even while the party raged on, you lean back, feeling your head grow heavy. It's late now, and though laughter still booms across the longhouse, you slip away into that blurry space between waking and sleeping. It's a reminder that rest isn't always tidy. Sometimes it comes in fragments, stolen between shouts, settling over you in a haze of warmth, food, and fellowship. The echoes of the feast fade. And now the longhouse lies in hush again. The fire has dimmed to soft coals. Children breathe steady in their beds, and you catch yourself drifting into a dream. This is where the Vikings believed another kind of journey began, not of ships or horses, but of the soul. You aren't just lying on straw and hide anymore. You're stepping into a world where dreams could shape destiny. You close your eyes and feel yourself wandering through misty forests, hearing faint voices that may or may not belong to the gods. For the Vikings, dreams weren't random flashes of imagination, they were messages. Odin, the All-Father, was thought to send visions. Freyja, goddess of magic, could walk through your sleep. A dream could warn of war, promise good fortune, or whisper secrets about a loved one's fate. To ignore it was to risk disaster. A mainstream historical fact. Sagas like the Saga of the Volsungs are full of dream omens. A dream of blood could foretell death. A dream of wolves might signal betrayal. Leaders often consulted dream interpreters before making big decisions, treating the night's visions as seriously as a council meeting. But here's the quirky detail. You might not even get to interpret your own dream. In some accounts, others in the community stepped in, offering their take on what your vision meant. Imagine waking up and having your neighbor insist, well, clearly that dream about the fish means you'll marry soon. Kind of like when a modern friend insists your dream about falling teeth is secretly about anxiety, only with much higher stakes. Historians still argue whether Viking dream culture was mainly symbolic storytelling, or if people truly believed these visions carried divine weight. Did farmers wake in sweat, convinced Odin had spoken to them? Or were these tales polished later, woven into sagas to make events sound faded and grand? The line between faith and literary drama is blurry even now. As you drift deeper into this imagined Viking dream, you notice how vivid it feels, like a waking vision. You're walking across a field of snow, ravens circling overhead, their cries echoing. Are they messengers of Odin or just hungry birds? You don't know, and neither did the Vikings. That uncertainty, that mystery, was part of the magic. You smirk at the thought of modern dream apps, analyzing your subconscious, while the Vikings had a whole pantheon of gods and spirits to blame. Still, the heart of it remains the same: humans searching for meaning in the strange. Stories our minds spin at night. The fire hisses softly as a log collapses, pulling you back toward the present. You lie there thinking how powerful it must have felt to believe your dreams could shape not just your own life, but your community's future. Every night, every nap was a chance to brush against destiny. And as you slide further into that twilight space, you whisper to yourself, maybe the best sleep isn't just about comfort. Maybe it's about feeling like your dreams matter. The dream lingers in your mind, but when you blink, you're no longer in the safety of the longhouse. Instead, you're beneath an endless stretch of northern sky. Stars so sharp, they look like icy sparks. The night air is biting, your breath puffing white, and you're tucked into furs against the hard ground. This isn't a feast or a cozy hearth, it's travel. It's the kind of night when sleep comes under open heavens, surrounded by silence and just a hint of danger. You roll over on your bedding, feeling the earth beneath you. For Vikings, journeys weren't always cushioned by ships or warm houses. Raids, hunts, and trading expeditions meant camping in fields, forests, or mountains. And sleep under those conditions, it was a gamble between rest and vigilance. A mainstream fact, Viking expeditions often required long overland treks, sometimes weeks at a time. Archaeological finds of portable bedding, rolled up furs, hides, and woven blankets hint at how they carried their sleep with them. Unlike the communal comfort of the longhouse, here each person relied on their own gear, making every traveler a self-contained cocoon against the cold. But the quirky detail? Some sagas mention warriors, claiming the earth itself lent them strength. When they slept outdoors, the ground wasn't just a surface, it was alive, pulsing with energy from the gods. You picture someone insisting their bedroll gave them divine power, when in reality, they probably just found the only dry patch of grass. Still, it's a reminder that belief can turn even hardship into something meaningful. Historians still argue whether Vikings treated open-air sleeping as a normal part of their rhythm or as a last resort. Was it embraced, almost ritualistic, or endured only when no shelter was near? The sagas give glimpses, but certainty slips away like mist. You lie back and gaze at the northern lights flickering across the sky. To the Vikings, those shimmering waves of green and purple weren't just atmospheric tricks, they were omens, signs from gods, sometimes thought to be the shining armor of Valkyries riding above. Imagine falling asleep under that kind of light show, believing warriors of legend were literally galloping over your head. It makes your own nights under city street lamps feel a little dull by comparison. But with beauty came unease. Out here, the sounds of the wild-pressed close wolves howling in the distance, owls swooping silently, the rustle of something moving in the dark. You hug the furs tighter, realizing that sleep outdoors was never entirely peaceful. Every snap of a twig could be friend or foe. And yet, the constant awareness probably made their dreams sharper, more vivid, the rest deeper when it finally arrived. You smile faintly, thinking about how some modern campers bring memory foam pads, thermal sleeping bags, and noise-canceling earplugs, while Vikings had nothing but hides and faith. Yet somehow, they not only survived but thrived. It makes you wonder if we've padded ourselves away from a kind of primal sleep, the kind that comes when the sky itself is your ceiling and the earth is your mattress. As you drift in this Viking camp, you pull the fur higher, let the chill sting your cheeks, and remind yourself, sometimes the best sleep isn't comfortable. Sometimes it's about surrendering to the world as it is vast. Raw and alive, the cold ground fades, and you find yourself in a quieter corner of Viking life home again. But not in the longhouse this time. Instead, you're in a small, dimly lit chamber, one of the private spaces only wealthier families could afford. Here sleep is a little more refined, almost luxurious compared to the rough communal bunks or open-air camps. You step inside, ducking under a low beam, and suddenly, the air feels softer, filled with the faint scent of herbs. Tucked into bedding, you glance at the bed, a raised wooden frame, rare but not unheard of in wealthier Viking households. Instead of straw scattered on the floor, here the bedding is layered, woven blankets, sheepskin, and maybe even imported textiles for the truly rich. Sleep here wasn't just about survival. It was a statement of status, a mainstream historical fact. Excavations of Viking age farmsteads reveal that while most slept on simple straw beds, some elite households had platforms or separate sleeping alcoves. These alcoves weren't large, but they offered privacy, something rare in a world where communal living was the norm. It meant you could actually stretch out without someone rolling over onto your arm. Now for the quirky part. Some finds suggest bedding was occasionally scented with herbs, like juniper or yarrow. Imagine trying to freshen up a musty bed by stuffing it with wild plants. That's the Viking equivalent of spraying lavender mist on your pillow. Not only would it have smelled pleasant, but many herbs were believed to carry protective or healing powers. Double duty for the anxious sleeper. Historians still argue how widespread these comforts really were. Were herbal stuffed, beds an everyday thing, or just a rare luxury for chieftains and their families? The evidence is scattered, like crumbs across a long-forgotten feast. Leaving room for debate, you stretch out on one of these beds, running your fingers along the woven wool blanket. It feels coarse compared to modern cotton sheets, but warm, dense, and secure. You can imagine how, after a long day of managing land, trading, or running a household, lying down here must have felt like sinking into a little pocket of peace. And here's the human touch. Even in these fancier quarters, you weren't totally isolated. Children might creep in during the night. Animals might shuffle nearby. And the sounds of the longhouse, the coughs, the whispers, the restless stirring still drifted through. Privacy was relative. Sleep was never completely yours alone. You smile, realizing that not much has changed. Today, people pay fortunes for luxury sleep setups, with adjustable beds and weighted blankets. Yet the heart of it is the same as a Viking tucking herbs into straw. The search for comfort, safety, and maybe just a touch of indulgence. You close your eyes in this little chamber, inhaling the faint herbal scent. It isn't perfect, but compared to the rocking ship or the cold earth, this feels like a treasure. You think maybe the Vikings didn't just have the best sleep because of their routines or their resilience. Maybe it was because, no matter their circumstances, they always found a way to make rest sacred, whether through furs, herbs, or simply the closeness of their community. The chamber fades, and you feel the tug of time again, carrying you not just across places, but across centuries. You're still inside a Viking world, but now you're peeking through the lens of what comes after. What traces of their sleep survive in bones, ruins, and whispers of memory? It's strange, lying in a bed of straw, while knowing scholars 1,000 years later will puzzle over how you rested. You look around the dark hall one more time, noticing things you might have missed before the width of the benches. The wear on the floorboards where people step down to stretch at night. The way soot collects in corners from years of fire smoke. To you, it's just life. To archaeologists, every scrap is a clue. A mainstream fact, excavations of Viking settlements like those in Iceland and Scandinavia reveal preserved bedding materials, charred timbers, and even impressions where wooden bed frames once stood. These remnants confirm that people slept in communal spaces, with fire as the central warmth, just as sagas described. In a way, your bed becomes a fossil of comfort. But here's the quirky tidbit. Sometimes, bodies buried with grave goods include beds themselves. One famous burial, the Oseberg ship, held a bed inside, complete with ornate carvings. Imagine valuing sleep so much that you carried your bed into the afterlife. Or maybe it wasn't about sleep at all, but about prestige. Making sure, even in death, you looked like someone with the best accommodations. Historians still argue whether these burial beds reflect everyday habits or purely ceremonial choices. Were the dead being given their real beds, the ones they loved or were new, symbolic ones crafted for the funeral? No one agrees, and that uncertainty makes each find feel like a whisper from the past. You can't quite catch. You lie still, thinking about how fragile sleep traces are. Straw rots, fabric disintegrates, wood crumbles, and yet enough survived to paint a picture. Enough to make you realize that sleep wasn't just background noise in Viking life. It was central, woven into ritual, belief, and daily survival. And here's the soft joke. You imagine some future archaeologist finding your memory foam pillow, cracked and fossilized, and writing a paper about how clearly 21st century people worshipped strange, rectangular objects filled with synthetic air. You chuckle, because that's exactly the kind of guesswork historians wrestle with today about Viking beds. The truth is, what they left behind speaks as much about what we want to find as it does about their real lives. Were Vikings sleeping like warriors ready for battle? Or like families simply trying to stay warm? Were their dreams fiery visions of gods? Or just the brain's way of saying, you ate too much goat stew last night? You pull the fur blanket up again, listening to the faint echo of centuries. In that sound, you hear both certainty and mystery, the crackle of the fire reminding you that some details are clear, while the smoke above blurs into unanswered questions. And as you exhale, you realize this is part of why Viking sleep feels so rich. It isn't just history. It's a puzzle that invites you to curl up and dream about the pieces still missing. The blurred echoes settle, and once again, you're lying inside the Viking longhouse. The same smoky rafters hang above. The same embers glow in the fire pit. But this time, the mood is different. This isn't the arrival, the bustle, or the noise of family settling down. No, this is the last night. The one where you finally give in to the rhythm you've been circling through all along. You ease onto the bench bed, straw rustling beneath your weight. A fur cloak is draped across your shoulders, heavy enough to press you down gently. like a hand guiding you toward stillness. Around you, the house is quieter than you've ever heard it. Children have already surrendered to sleep, their small breaths rising and falling in unison. A few muffled snores drift from the far corner. Even the livestock outside have gone silent. For once, nothing competes with the pull of rest. A mainstream historical fact anchors you. Viking days were grueling farming. Trading, crafting, raiding. Sleep wasn't an indulgence, but a necessity. Archaeological and literary evidence alike show how much they valued rest, weaving it into cycles of health, strength, and even divine connection. Sleep wasn't stolen. It was honored. Then comes the quirky thread you remember that odd belief about elves and spirits visiting at night. Some Vikings tucked protective charms near their beds to guard against such intrusions. It's almost funny lying here, wondering if the clink of your neighbor's necklace is meant to keep nightmares away. And yet, when you're half asleep, doesn't every creak in the rafters sound like something supernatural anyway? Historians still argue whether Viking sleep was segmented like in later medieval Europe, waking at midnight for prayers or chores before returning to bed, or if they drifted straight through in one long stretch. The sagas don't settle it, leaving you to wonder, did people stir in the darkness, poke at the fire, whisper quietly, before sinking back into dreams? Or was it you, restless, inventing the pattern from fragments of evidence? You close your eyes, and the fire's warmth spreads across your skin. Your mind drifts between gods and ancestors, between the rhythm of oars and the hush of fields under snow. All the fragments, the herbs, the straw, the shared bodies for warmth, the fear of spirits, the dreams that guided choices, they come together here, in this final drift toward sleep. And so, with the night heavy around you and history's weight tucked like a second blanket, you finally understand why people say Vikings had the best sleep in history. It wasn't just the furs, or the dark nights, or the fatigue of hard work. It was that sleep for them was never empty. It was full of meaning, of connection, of life itself. Now, the longhouse dims further, and the fire becomes nothing more than a red glow in the distance. Each ember fades like a heartbeat slowing down. You let your breathing match that rhythm, slower and softer with every exhale. The rafters above blur into darkness until you're not sure whether your eyes are open or closed. The straw beneath you no longer feels rough, just warm, as if the ground itself is holding you. The fur across your chest is a gentle weight, not a burden, but a comfort. The noises of the house, those whispers, those occasional creaks become distant, like the memory of waves on a faraway shore. Your mind begins to let go of the questions, the details, even the debates of scholars and the worries of travelers. Instead, all that remains is the simple truth. People then, like people now, longed for rest. And rest is here for you too, in this moment. Let your body sink deeper, as though the bed itself is soft earth drawing you in. Let your thoughts scatter, like sparks from the fire carried up into the night sky. With each breath, the world grows quieter, gentler, until even the Viking longhouse dissolves into a blur. There is no rush now, no tasks left undone. Only the ease of drifting, only the calm that waits in the folds of sleep. And so, tonight, you let go. You let the night carry you, the way it carried them 1,000 years ago. Safe and sound under fur and firelight. Good night. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.